It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome to Jill on Money. Yes, it's the last weekend in May. Oh my God. I don't know about you guys. I can barely keep track of the calendar, day of the week. It's all bleeding into the next. But it is the end of May, and maybe that's good news for you. Maybe not. I can't tell you. What I can tell you is this is a program that attempts to take the mystery out of your finances during this really difficult pandemic. We are sending our good, warm wishes to all of you and your families. We hope you are enjoying good health, and we hope that you're also being very careful. I don't like these reports of people going a little nuts. Let's be conservative. You all know that after listening to me for so long, that I tend to be a conservative person by nature. That's the same way I am about my health. I'm not one of these people who, when I'm not feeling well, I just go to work. I just don't go. There's been a couple of times I think where Mark has sent me home when my voice, where I felt okay, but my voice sounded terrible. So, just use that kind of common sense. You wouldn't want to be around somebody who's not feeling well, and you don't want to be around somebody who's not taking this seriously. This is a serious matter. And your money is also serious. It's not the everything. Your health is most important, but your money's probably pretty close up there. So we want to remind you we are broadcasting from the Capital One virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Also, a little bit of housekeeping here. Want to remind you to email us your questions. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. That's the email address. You can always go to the website, jillonmoney.com. You can listen to past shows, and you could also read all of the stuff that I'm writing and listen to previous episodes, and maybe you could even watch some TV appearances that I will have made, and check out the resource section, which is awesome, where Mark is beefing it up all the time with cool stuff. So check it out. It's jillonmoney.com. All right, let's get to some questions. Okay, here is from Kevin, who says, love your podcast. Thanks, Kevin. I'm looking for some advice. We're about to sell our second home. After we pay capital gains, we will have around $185,000. My wife wants to get this money into the market ASAP, likely into Vanguard exchange traded funds. I feel like we should pay down some of her student loan and wanted to see if you had other ideas on what we could do with this money with everything going on. Okay, here's what the story is. They live in Houston. He's 39. Wife is 35. They've got a 4-year-old son. The current house that they own is worth about $600,000. They've got $390,000 outstanding, a 30-year mortgage, 3.5%. Great. That's a fixed rate. One car loan, $430 a month. Aha. Student loan debt, $75,000. It's variable. The rate right now is less than 1%. Oh, boy. Okay. Other debt, credit cards, none. Current investments, a Roth IRA, $160,000. 401k, just over $500,000. Vanguard brokerage account, $190,000. Wife's company stock, $75,000. And just for you, Mark, Bitcoin, $85,000. All right, we put $15,000 a year into a 529 account for our son. I'm a 1099 employee. I make around $165,000 to $180,000. My wife works full-time and she makes $270,000 in an average year. So they're taking a hit to their salaries this year, probably about 15 to 20%. They max her 401k and his solo 401k. I don't foresee any major expenses in the near future. Our jobs are fairly secure. We love our current home. We don't plan to move. There's no need to buy a new car or other major expenses. When our son enters school, he will be in the public school system at least until 5th grade, unless we change that. I know we can't time the market, but get that? I know we can't time the market, but I don't want to regret or lose a chunk of this cash after owning the house for 12 years. Is there some more estate planning we should be considering? Is there a trust? I don't need the money for anything particular. What should we do before my wife puts it all in the market and we have another crash? Thanks. Best. Kevin. All right. Take a deep breath, Kevin. You guys are in very good shape. Considering that you have 185,000 to invest, I think there's a few things that you didn't mention. I'm going to presume these things, but let's just make sure. I want to make sure that you have an emergency reserve fund. You didn't mention um, any savings or checking or money market, but I'm going to assume that maybe there's some money in that Vanguard brokerage account, that 190,000. But if not, out of the 185, first and foremost, let's make sure you've got 6 months of your living expenses set aside. The next, okay, so on the student loan debt, it's pretty hard to pay down a 1% note. However, maybe there's a nice way that we can split the difference between you and your wife. Because it sounds to me like you would like to be a little bit more conservative and she would like to be a little more aggressive. And you're not going to time the market. So let's say that of the remaining money, whether it's 185 or something less, that you pay off the student loan because at some point, probably not anytime soon, but in the next few years, I presume that's going to start to adjust. So you could pay that off right now, get it off your plate, and maybe even if the car loan is a couple, 3, 4%, same thing with that. You can pay that off too, and then the rest can go into the Vanguard brokerage account. I think that you've got plenty of risk that already exists in your life between the exchange traded funds in the Vanguard account, including your wife's company stock and also the Bitcoin. So, in my mind, you've already got a lot of risk out there. I think it's reasonable to make sure you've got, again, presuming you've got that savings account, that emergency reserve funded. I think it's quite lovely to take this opportunity to say that you've made a bunch of money in real estate, pay off the car loan, pay off the student loan debt, and now you're in a situation where if something strange happens, maybe your salaries go down more than you expect, maybe there's a problem where we have a next dip down in the economy, you're prepared. Your expenses are really tightened up. I think that's a good way to satisfy both of your needs. Hers to get the money invested, yours to also be conservative. And I think there is a case to be made for both of them. No one thinks it's smart to pay off a 1% loan, but because you have this what we'll call it found money, I do think it's worthwhile considering that we've come through a tough time and that emotionally it might be very good for you guys to just get rid of those two debts, the car loan and the student loan. And then you've got plenty of money invested already. And by the way, as we speak, markets are moving higher. I don't know if it's going to go down again, and neither do you, neither does she. So it's such a good opportunity to just get some of that risk whittled down. Okay, I hope that helps, Kevin. If you, like Kevin, have a question about investing or market timing, I don't believe in it, then just send us an email. It's askjill@jillonmoney.com. Hey, while you are going to break, maybe you could just quickly subscribe to our podcast. It is called Jill on Money, and we release it daily. Okay, we'll be right back.
Back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger helps you take the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And what did you do during the break? I was excited. I went and did some shopping. Just kidding. I did not. I do notice that sometimes when I'm bored now that I'm at home, I will go back through my past Amazon orders and see if anything that I ordered is back and available. Now, Mark, do you do that obsessively where you check, even if I don't really need it, I'm just wondering well, are those Lysol wipes still sold out or not? Is there still the same crunch in terms of inventory? And I just monitor it on Amazon. Not that I even need it because I got more toilet paper than I'll probably ever use. We are here. Listen, you got to have a sense of humor, gang. Someone just said to me, like, oh, your partner can join you on this. I'm like, I don't think so. I think my partner's pretty sick of me right now. Really, a lot of close time. Mark, in that small space that you have, you are surviving and not only thriving. And that boy is about to turn 1. So, everybody, why don't we figure out great presents for the prince of the Jill on Money broadcasting empire? The prince is on thin ice. He has been 50-50 with his afternoon naps. And so this is really a challenge for Mark and his partner. So it's touch and go when we get to the afternoon. But fingers crossed that this is all going to go okay. If you've got a financial question, please don't hesitate. Send us an email. It's askjill@jillonmoney.com. And if you happen to be on our website, and a lot of you have been visiting the website, and we thank you for that, there's a contact button on the upper right-hand corner. So just click that and we'll get your message. So Karen writes, thanks so much for the daily pod. Oh, all right. Now, wait a second. It's hard for me to read this, Mark. This is when I need you to read the message, but I'll read it anyway. You are brilliant. Not so much, but you're brilliant and you make the complex matters seem simple to understand. That I do. So that's good. Okay. First, I know how blessed I am to be healthy and to still have a job. Amen, sister. I feel the same way. Okay. My husband and I are physicians. We're in our 40s. We are not frontline. We see most patients virtually right now. Combined salary, 400 grand a year. We're doing nicely, we think, with retirement savings. We both max out our 403Bs. We fund backdoor Roth IRAs. So here's what they got. 950 grand is in the 403Bs in a target date fund, $43,000 in backdoor Roth. And right now that's 100% in the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. $140,000 in savings. And Karen says, I know it's a large cash position. It makes me feel safe. And I feel it offsets the 100% equities in our Roth. Karen, girl, I would never scold you for having too much in savings. I love my savings account. I agree. And Karen also has $160,000 in 529 accounts for her kids who are 14 and 12. Okay, here we go for the question. The after-tax brokerage account, which we started 2 years ago, it's currently valued at about $80,000. And what she writes is, I was trying to mimic the stock to bond ratios in the target date fund using 3 funds, total U.S. fund, international index, and a bond index. Now I'm questioning if a bond index fund should be in there at all. Some experts say bond funds should only be used in tax-advantaged accounts. Am I making a drastic mistake by having the bond fund in there? The answer to that is no. Okay, so no to that question. We are saving aggressively in the brokerage account. We feel confused on how to maintain the portfolio mix if bonds shouldn't be in the after-tax account. I'm looking to my favorite financial guru to help me understand bond allocation. One more piece of info. All the medical school loans are paid off except for 34 grand left on a loan that's at 1.2%. I don't think I need to hurry to pay that off. Otherwise debt-free, 2 mortgages, primary and vacation, $700,000. As a doctor, I like that you end your podcast with wash your hands reminder. Thank you, Karen. Okay, Karen, couple of things. First of all, think about this. In your savings account, since you know you have 140,000 and it's probably too much, just like the previous question that we answered in the first segment, I might just take the money that's in your savings account. I bet you're not earning 1.2% on that savings. I might pay off the medical school debt, the 34 grand. Or at least get a chunk, whack, 20 grand on that, especially because you're good savers, where you're saving in that brokerage account. So I would just pay off the medical school loan. As far as the allocation, I do think that you could have a bond portfolio in that mix. I don't think you say where you live. One thing that you could consider is if you live in a high income tax state, that you might choose a municipal bond fund instead of a general bond index fund. That's number one. The other thing you might consider is this. If you think that bond portfolio is generating too much taxable income, you could essentially go a little bit heavier in your bond position in your retirement accounts where there is no tax liability. So that you might say that in some respects, you could say, I'll have some money that is not generating too much tax that is in my brokerage account, reduce that bond position, and then maybe go a little bit heavier in your bond position in your 403Bs. But if you took your whole portfolio together, you'd probably sort of keep the same allocation. Now, all this being said, I just want to make sure one thing. The target date funds that you're using, do they have more risk than you might feel comfortable assuming? One of the things that became very clear after the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, and maybe also during this crisis, is that people didn't understand that those target date funds were very much weighted towards more aggressive allocations than maybe you might have imagined. And the reason is that a target date fund, even for someone in their 40s, is not presuming that you're investing until you reach 65, but it is presuming that you are investing through age 65 and beyond. And that's why they tend to have a much larger allocation into stocks. I don't think that many people understand that those target date funds can move around quite a bit. So, a couple of things. One is make sure you're comfortable with the risk level of that target date fund. Number two, if you are in a high tax state, you may want to move your bond position from a general bond index fund to a municipal bond fund. Again, it really depends on the state where you reside. If you live in a state where there's no state income tax, if you live in Washington state, for example, then I wouldn't worry about it at all. And frankly, tax rates are just not that high right now. So I'm not even sure I'd worry about it anyway, but it's worth at least taking a look at if you are in a high tax state. I mean, right now, you guys said you make $400,000 together, but given the amount of money you put away into retirement, most of your income is taxed at 24%, not at 32%. So you're not even in that high a tax bracket. And I would suspect that that tax bracket's going up. So I wouldn't be too afraid of the tax situation. I like bonds. I know they're really boring. I know they're hard to get your arms around. I know that we're in a very low interest rate environment, which means bond prices have already gone up, but they do act differently than stocks over the long term. And I do like them in a portfolio. So, Karen, thank you so much for your question. And I am very grateful. And it sounds like you're doing a really good job. So, if I have not covered what you want me to cover, you'll just give us a shout back. Okay. Um, hey, Mark, before we go to break, you saw that those economic impact payments are being, they're using prepaid debit cards. Well, everyone's freaking out because they arrive in a plain envelope and people don't know what they are and people are throwing them out. And I read an article on AARP that says that the debit card, they have some surprise fees. So I don't know why the government got involved in this. This seems like the dumbest decision. Anyway, don't throw out any plain envelopes. You might have a debit card with your economic impact payment, that $1,200, okay, from the Govy, or $2,400. All right, it's Jill on Money. If you have a financial question, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. We're smack in the middle of our first hour with you, and we are so delighted that you are joining us today. Thank you so much for listening. Mark and I always appreciate that. If you've got a financial question, why don't you send us an email? Why are you sitting on that question? Why are you stewing? Why are you letting this come between you and a family member? You know, you fight about money all the time. Let us try to help you out. We can walk you through it. And especially if there is some contention, maybe about strategy between you and a spouse, you and a parent, you and a child, We'd love to help you. Truly, that is what we do. It's why we like this show so much. It's why we've created a show that's really for you. Remember, you can always go to the website, jillonmoney.com. If you're listening to this and you've missed part of the show, you can listen to the earlier episodes. You can find other segments. You can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Mark puts that together every single week. He does so much work. I do nothing. I'm like the voice and the face of the enterprise. He is the hard work. Okay. All right. Let us get to your questions. And here we have one from Marcia, who writes, I enjoy your segments on CBS This Morning. Today, this is from a week ago or so, you mentioned refinancing student loans is a smart thing to do while interest rates are low. Now, she writes, both of my daughters have student loans with private financial institutions, so no waiver of fees or payments. Can you recommend institutions they could contact? One of the places that I have come to really like, and not that I have ever done business with them, but I like their business model, is Common Bond. We recently caught up with the CEO there, and I just think it's a good organization. They've got good products, quite transparent in the fee structure. You could also try SoFi. There are certainly many opportunities at some of the banks, like Capital One does a big student loan program. Those are the big ones that I know of. And it may not be that it's worth it for you. That's the other thing. When you go and check out these other rates, it may be that you find, what I have is actually pretty good, but it's certainly worthwhile at least checking it out. Okay. Here we go. Joel writes, I listen to your show every day. That's the podcast. I was wondering whether your advice on the length of emergency funds has changed with COVID. I have about 12 months in an Ally savings account and have continued working and making automatic payments into my 403B, my Roth IRA, and my taxable account for the time being. The answer, Joel, is no. I've been a wimp from way back when. It didn't take a virus for me to say 6 to 12 months of living expenses in the bank. Now, the only caveat I have is that if you are approaching retirement, then you might want to have more like 12 to 24 months. But other than that, I still like 6 to 12 months. I think that's probably the right amount. If you're a wimp like me, you sort of err on the side of 12 months. But now is the time where people are starting to finally understand the importance of an emergency reserve fund. I wish it didn't take a global pandemic to beat this dead horse, truly. Okay? Marianne writes, I am an 83-year-old widow. I live on Long Island. My income consists of $9,000 from the state of New York, which is a disability pension, plus I receive a Social Security check of $16,000. I do not work. I haven't filed income taxes since I retired because of my limited income. Interesting. This is in May. I've yet to receive a stimulus check from the government, even though I have direct deposit for all my above income. I've been on the IRS site trying to find out where my check is. I'm continually shut out. They claim that the information is not available at this time. I have clicked on every link with the same result. Can you help me find out why everyone around me has received a check and I haven't? I don't know why you haven't. Every bit of information that I've gotten from the IRS has said that if you have a direct deposit for your Social Security, and if we have that on record, then we should be able to send you your economic impact payment. Now, the other thing is that on the IRS website, irs.gov/coronavirus/economic impact payments, there are some links there. One that says, see if you're eligible for a payment. You should be. And then there's a guide, which is, how you should get your payment. So, earlier I kind of mentioned briefly that there are some people who may have received a debit card. I wonder if that may be you, and maybe you didn't realize it. There's a Get My Payment tool on the irs.gov site, Get My Payment tool. That will tell you what the status of your payment is. I feel bad for these people. These are the people who are supposed to get the help, right? That's the thing that's tough. Okay. Judy writes, We don't have to take our required minimum distribution here in 2020. So, does it make sense to transfer that amount into our Roth IRA? Wouldn't the consequences be the same? I've received an automatic disbursement in March. Can I return that amount and have it redeposited in my account? I enjoy listening to you. Thanks so much, Judy. Well, you can. You absolutely can take the money out. And I don't even know if you have to move it to your Roth. You could take the money out, pay the tax on it, and just have it. But I don't know if you can then just put it into your Roth. I don't think you can do that. In other words, it depends on your other sources of income. I would have to really know what else is going on because there's other moving pieces here. Do you have other IRA? Because you really are talking about converting. I don't know if that makes sense for you right now. So I think that unless you have earned income, you don't just transfer it into a Roth. But if you do want to take the money out and pay the tax due, because it'll just, eventually it's going to reduce the amount you have to take out over the long term, you certainly could do it. And maybe that makes sense for you. But there are a few other variables that we would want to know about. And happy to do that if you just follow up with us. Okay. Makes sense? Very good. Okay, when we return, we're going to get back to more of your questions. Here's what you can do during the break. You can go onto the website, jillonmoney.com, and just bookmark it. So it's always there for you because we always got new stuff happening. Okay, do that right now, jillonmoney.com. Bookmark it. Okay, we'll be right back.
(401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you have a financial question, an investment question, perhaps even a tax question. I can't believe we're talking about taxes in the spring. It's so weird, like this far into the spring, May, June. But remember, July 15th, if you haven't filed yet. We'll talk about that more as we get closer, because I have a feeling people who haven't filed at this point are probably going to wait till the bitter end. This is a program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. Send us an email. We would really like to chat with you and help you walk through some of the big questions that you're facing right now. Anton writes, I recently came across your podcast and it's now become a big part of my day. I listen to it while doing errands around the house and even when I go for walks around the neighborhood. Thank you. Oh, glad to be with you. Anton writes, my wife and I are currently in a situation where we are able to push most of our income, 80%, let me do that again, 80% of their income into investing for the future. I am 36. She is 29. We have a 6-month emergency fund and no major debt. It's amazing. We are able to invest $8,000 a month from our income, and we have been pushing it into a taxable account with Vanguard. We don't believe in market timing, so we just go about putting that money in every month. The only fund we have in that account, it's a taxable account, is the Target Retirement Fund 2050. But lately, I've come across various articles that say target retirement funds in taxable accounts may not be tax efficient because of the bonds that are involved. I don't fully understand the tax efficiency part of it, and I'm wondering if this is something we need to consider, or should we just go about doing what we're doing? I started with a target retirement fund because it seems simple enough, and I could just be a consistent yet passive investor. Is the tax inefficiency of this enough of a factor that we should change what we invest in? We're committed to the $8,000 a month, but we are open to putting it towards something else if the target retirement fund isn't optimal. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for all you do. Best, Anton. Just make sure that the target retirement fund doesn't have more risk than you want. Where do you live? What's your tax bracket? I need to know more about you. If you're sitting in the 22% tax bracket, married filing jointly, then don't worry about it. then pay the tax and move on. And if you're living in a high tax state, then again, you might consider municipal bonds. If you've got a whole bunch of money in this account, maybe there are some other types of investments that we could put into this account that would round you out. And maybe it's just three or four funds and it's the exact same thing, but it's more suited to your particular situation. So, Anton, if you were to follow up with us and just give us a little bit more info, how much do you guys earn? What's in there right now? And maybe what are your other investment allocations look like? That would be interesting for us to see. Okay, let's see. We have a question from Pat. Pat is 54 and says, I have a goal to retire at age 60. I earn about $240,000 a year. I've worked my way up over the past 15 years of my career. I am lucky and fortunate. I'm married, but my wife and I keep our finances separate. Okay, here are Pat's numbers. Pat says, I've got $800,000 in a 401k, maxing it out at $19,500, as well as the additional $6,500 for being over 50. $700,000 Vanguard Index Mutual Funds, $100,000 in 8 individual stocks. This is the fun money account, Facebook, Netflix. That's fun for me, all right. $205,000 traditional IRA, 50 grand 60-month emergency reserve fund, all in 1.85 million bucks invested. Pretty good. Okay, house worth $1.4 million. Pat owes $630,000 on it. In addition, I have a single residential and duplex that provides net profit of 1,500 bucks a month. So, got that? So he's putting away, or she's putting away 19.5 plus, so we just do the math. 26 in the retirement accounts, 1,500 a month that comes in from the rental, $2,000 a month in 5 index funds, a lot of money. So questions, should I continue to do dollar cost averaging, putting $2,000 a month in index funds, max the 401k, or should I pay down the house? Keep putting the money away. Do not pay down the house. Keep putting the money away. That's easy. That's an easy one. I don't even have to know what your mortgage is. I do know that for right now, just keep doing what you're doing. You're kicking butt. Side note, Pat says, I went to a Vanguard seminar when I was in my late 20s. I started investing $50 a month in index funds. As I made more money, I continued to increase it. All of my investing has been self-taught. I'm so fortunate that I caught on to the benefits of dollar cost averaging with index funds. It's the best thing I ever did from a financial perspective. It can be that easy, gang. Don't pay down that mortgage, Pat. Keep it. Keep it for right now. I have a feeling, I don't know, we'll see. I'd love to know how we get, as we get closer to your retirement, whether you're going to keep that house or not. You are doing incredibly well. Mark, would you say that Pat gets the gold star of the hour? I think so. This is an amazing story. Yeah, this has been like a gold star hour of amazing financial stories. So thank you all for sharing them. And for those of you listening, you don't have to have $1.8 million. Listen to Pat. Pat started with $50 a month. That's how it starts. It starts somewhere. Take an action, make it automatic, and stick to it. All right, you are listening to Jill on Money, and when we return, we're going to finish up the hour with hopefully another uplifting story because you guys are inspirational today. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we thank you so much for joining us this hour. We are broadcasting from the Capital One virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? I love these virtual studios. I was just saying to somebody, Mark, that I didn't think you were ever going to go back into the physical studio again because this has been working out so well. And you know what? We'll probably go to interviews again, but no one wants to walk into a teeny tiny studio with me and have me wearing a mask and him or her wearing a mask. I don't know. I'm kind of digging this. I like the work from home. I'm good with it. Definitely. Okay, let's get you some more of these questions. Susan writes, I am the personal representative for my significant other's estate. He passed away, April 9th, 2 weeks ago. I received a stimulus check for him a week before filing his taxes for 2019. I'm not sure how to return the check. I can't find an answer on irs.gov. I don't know if I can merely just not cash the check. Thank you. You know what? You probably can put the check into the estate, into his account or into the estate account, and then it'll probably be reversed next year. So that's probably what I would do because I hear this from people. You can't actually get to the IRS to get a question answered. It's completely annoying. That's what I would do, and they'll true it up next year, or when you file that estate tax return. I'm sure that will easily be done. Sorry for your loss. Ugh, what a time. What a time. Okay, this is from Tommy. Why is the Dow still above 23,000? Actually, this is when he wrote this, but I'll just say that why is it still above? Why is it nearing 25,000 when 36 million people are unemployed? Thanks for your comments. You know what, Tommy? I can't make sense of this myself. I think it's just crazy. I think that this is just one of those cases where we understand that the stock market, which is just a bet on a company's ability to make money in the future, and all these collective companies, that this is now a bet that the winners of this period of time are just going to get bigger. They're going to keep dominating, and that the losers are just going to fade away, and that companies will keep making money. And by the way, companies may be doing some downsizing right now that they should have been doing all along. So maybe for corporate America, this will be okay. I tend to think that maybe this run up might be a little bit overdone, but I don't know. So that's my best guess. All right. When we return, we've got a great interview for you. So stay tuned. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, just send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's hour number 2 of Jill on Money, and we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. Got a good interview for you today. My old pal, Dan Roth. He is the editor-in-chief at LinkedIn, and we thought it would be a great time to find out what's happening in the landscape of the labor market, and specifically how work has changed since the lockdown. So we're going to start this by talking about some of the pros and cons of working from home. I'm sure you all can add to this list. Here's our interview with Dan Roth. What are some of the big picture changes that you think are going to be long lasting in the workplace looking ahead after the pandemic?
There are a couple things that we've heard from influencers and from people on members just talking about how their world is changing. I think a big one that we've heard from Bill Gates talk about as an example is that the old way of assuming that there are ways to ship product and to move yourself around the world are not going to come back. Even post-pandemic, even with a vaccine, you might get into a situation where it's okay to travel again and it's okay to ship your goods again. But I don't think anyone wants to be put in a situation where they are dependent on it. So you're going to see a lot of what we used to call reshoring, manufacturers putting their supply chains much closer to the distribution. That's going to accelerate. And this is what Ray Dalio had mentioned this, that he thinks it starts with healthcare. And you start seeing these companies saying, we can't afford to have any development being done far away from the home office. But you're going to see it in retail and in any place where you used to be able to get your goods made wherever in the world it's cheapest. Cheapest is no longer going to be good enough. You have to have a reliable sense that you can get those goods right away. You can make changes quickly. You can visit these factories or these manufacturing areas. So that's a huge one. And then business travel might not come back for a very long time, if only because we are realizing that we can do what we are doing without getting on planes.
Now, you used to travel quite a bit, right?
I would, for my entire career, I have at least traveled a week a month, if not more. And it's part of how I've done business. It is part of how I assumed I had to do business.
And let me ask you this I know that obviously LinkedIn itself, owned by Microsoft, has had video conferencing capabilities for a long time. So, can you talk about the difference between having a Zoom meeting versus an in person meeting? Is there some subtlety that you pick up from the actual physical interaction with someone on the other side?
There definitely is. And I think that, first of all, I probably spend half of my days on video calls even before this pandemic, just because I was dealing with most of my colleagues are in San Francisco. Well, I'm based in New York. There are people in Seattle I have to talk to. I've got teams in London and Sao Paulo and Bangalore. So I'm always on a video chat. The difference is that when you are on these calls, and this is still true, even now that I'm 100% virtual, like most of the world, is that when you are on these video calls, you have a certain set amount of time. You get things done, you have an agenda, things you want to accomplish something, you start at a certain time, and you have a hard stop at another time. In our old world, pre-pandemic, the way that stuff got done was in the hallway. And you would, no matter how many video calls I was on, when projects really took off, they were running into someone in the hall and suggesting something, and it leads to somewhere else. And it's those kind of casual conversations that were really the ones that led to really great initiatives, and where we were able to connect dots in a way that you can't when you are scheduling every single call with one, two, three people.
Now, you are someone who is a creative person, you're writer, editor, that's your background. Is there some concern that that lack of spark could limit the creativity in your organization or in any organization?
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned about that. Anytime we have a situation where something is not working as well as it should, that is an opportunity for an entrepreneur to come in and invent something that makes it work well. So I think in the short term, it will cause problems to have so much being done on these individual meetings. But I think that there are people who are already coming up with the software and the connectivity ideas that will find a way to virtually create those kind of hall room conversations that made projects move faster.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that, you're used to a newsroom. I'm used to a newsroom where people just sort of huddle around and talk. I guess I wonder how effective it will be if we were to go back into the office and we had to be social distancing and we were wearing masks and not necessarily catching facial tics here and there and understanding the nonverbal cues, how effective it would be to be in the
Yeah,
office.
it's a great question. I've got a good friend who lives in Shanghai, where this is how they operate: is they wear masks all day long in their meetings, and he says it's the biggest problem is just annoying. I mean, you're
Hmm.
breathing into this mask all day long. You're in these meetings. You're not picking up. You're getting like 80% of the meeting in place. You're definitely missing these kind of nonverbal cues. There is no question it adds friction to the system, but it's better than not meeting at all.
So, a number of technology companies have said that they are going to allow employees to work from home until the end of the year, whether it's Google or Amazon and Slack. And just recently, we had a notice from Twitter where it sounds like they're actually saying if you want to work from home forever, it would be okay. How much of this do you think is going to really accelerate the work from home movement really in a long term way? I'm not talking about the next year. I'm talking about the next 5 or 10 years.
I think that it will have a massive impact on companies' ability to be okay with people working from home, which will free up a lot of people to start working at home. Some of the biggest, I've certainly seen this with my colleagues who would have liked to have worked from home. And even though LinkedIn itself never had a very firm policy on it, it always felt like it was the kind of thing you didn't even want to ask, can I work from home? That's now gone. I think that we have all realized that we can do our work from home. So I think that kind of social stigma, it's almost like what the world was like when all men wore hats. And you were like, no one liked wearing hats, but everyone was like, oh, I guess you got to wear a hat to be a professional. and then people just stop wearing hats. And you're like, why did we ever wear hats in the first place? So I think that that's a little bit about what it's going to be like, is that you're like, oh, of course we should be able to work from home. That being said, I do think that there is my big question, I don't know the answer to this, is what's the FOMO like for when people start going back to work? And even though we can all work from home, the nice part is it's all even right now. We are all working from home. But what happens when your boss is back to work and a few lieutenants and that key person that you're constantly competing with at work is now showing up at the office? Do you feel the pull to start showing up even though you don't have to? And I think that kind of human nature of how does our competitiveness and our need to get ahead, how does that play into our decision to work at home? We'll see how it pays off.
We'll get back to our interview with Dan Roth in just a minute. Hey, during the break, why don't you do this? Go to the website, jillonmoney.com, and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You may even want to buy my book. You'll see. It's all there. Go to jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And today is a great day to talk about this. We've got a special guest. His name is Dan Roth. He is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. Now, many of you have been writing in and talking about what's going on in your careers amid coronavirus. And this is a rough time, gang. I know a lot of people who are working from home are feeling the pressure. A lot of people worried about their kids who are graduating into this environment, but even just their younger relatives and friends who are working and now feeling a little bit remote and feeling like it's very difficult to feel engaged at work. All of this is swirling around in this such a surreal time. And of course, I speak about this in a weird way because we are privileged, those among us who get to work from home. And I think everyone knows that, right? You know, you're like, wow, I have a job, thank God. But once you've crossed that hurdle, now the next question is, well, how do I actually remain engaged? How do I, maybe even as a manager, help manage my people? A lot of people, when they're in the management role, they'll walk through the hallways and try to kibitz with people who work for them. You can't do that anymore. It has to be very specific. So how do you do that? What is your way of interacting and trying to remain relevant? It's so hard. It's a whole different skill set that everybody is learning. So that's why we think that this interview that we recently conducted with Dan Roth is so important because, it's one thing to say, oh, yes, I'm going to read an article. I'm going to go listen to Jill, but listen about the practical methods here that Dan Roth is going to advocate about what needs to happen here to help people feel more part of the team, whether they're the leader or the team member. So here's more of our interview with Dan Roth. I was speaking to a very higher up in a financial service organization, and he said, quite candidly, I have no interest in going back to the office anytime soon. But as soon as I heard my CEO saying that he wants to be back in the office and that others were chomping at the bit to get back in the office, he's like, now I feel like I can't stay at home. And now I feel like I am going to have a black mark against me if I choose to work from home. And there was an interesting back and forth about it in that the employment law people came back and said to the boss, stop saying that on these calls. Because they felt like there was a real pushback that it's almost like you want to show that you're fit and that you're up for the challenge and that you don't want to go against what the boss is saying. And so the boss almost has to go 180 degrees the other direction to say, you know what? I'm going to go back as much as I need to be back, and whoever needs to be back, you almost have to give people permission. Otherwise, they almost feel bullied into being back if they are not critically important to the mission of being in that building.
You raise a great point, which is that the need to communicate is so much higher when we are all working like this. And I think that if we end up with a much more distributed workforce, the onus on managers to understand how their words are interpreted by their employees, because they can't pick up those facial expressions, because they are reading stuff in email, you're going to have to be so clear and understand what the sub meanings are underneath everything that you're saying. So post-pandemic, the need for leadership communication is going to be much, much greater. You are going to be dealing with workforces everywhere who are trying to figure out what you're trying to say.
In the normal work from home environment, is there a hit to productivity on those who work at home versus those who work in a physical office space, do you think?
We just did a study recently that asked about productivity gains and about how people are dealing with this. And it was something like 23% of survey respondents said that they've been interrupted by a pet at home, and that people were something like over 40% were being interrupted by family, plus 20% were having technical problems. So you are forced to be a teacher, your own tech support, deal with all kinds of family issues at home. How can you be productive? I mean, I'll give you one example from my own life. Is my wife, who just started a company right before the pandemic hit, is trying to get her company off the ground. I am doing my job, the same amount of work that I've always had. And we are homeschooling, by necessity, 3 boys in Brooklyn. So I teach first grade from 8 to 10:30 in the morning, and then my wife takes over, and then I come back, and we have these shifts, but we're not trying to remember where did I leave off this project and to come back and to do this. It's impossible. I think once school starts, it might make life a little bit easier, but yeah, how could productivity not have taken a hit?
Though you're not commuting.
Yeah, but I was just going to say that, Joe. That's exactly that is the feedback that we've heard from a number of people, is that the big gains that they get is the lack of commute. That's true. I mean, I would have been, from 8 to 9, I would have been commuting.
So tell me about what you're seeing on the site in terms of searches. I mean, there are essentially a quarter of Americans are sidelined right now. Are your searches, is time spent on LinkedIn rising? What are you finding?
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of people who are using LinkedIn to talk about what they're doing, where they need help, where they can offer help, has gone up during this time. The quality of the conversations has definitely risen. You are seeing people who are saying, I've lost my job and I need to find work. Or even more, and this has been fascinating, is after Airbnb announced its layoffs, 25% of the company laid off, my feed and so many people's feeds just started filling up with Airbnb employees saying, unfortunately, I lost my job today. And here's other colleagues who have lost their jobs. And these are the kind of things I can do in the workforce and also hire this other person. And it's very different than what we saw in past financial crises or when individual industries were hurt before. A lot of times when you lose your job, the first thing you do is you might want to hide, and you might not want to tell anyone, and there was a shame associated with it. I think what we're seeing when we are all in this together is that people are much more willing to go out there and reveal where they are, that they don't have any opportunities right now, that they are struggling, that they are looking for work, and that they need help. And you're seeing in the comments people saying, hey, I'd love to help you. Here's someone I know. Here we're hiring, or we will be hiring soon. And so this give and get help dynamic is a really fascinating one to see.
Where are you seeing growth on LinkedIn in terms of searches and companies that are hiring right now?
Yeah, well, the growth in hiring is happening on anyone who is involved with computer engineering and hardware. We're seeing a lot of need for people to basically keep the systems up that we all rely on today. And if you are someone we're doing, this call, and we're relying on the network to be able to stay up while we do it. I've got everyone in my home is right now on a screen trying to do school or whatever it is they're doing, and those networks have to stay up. So if you are involved at all in any kind of networking, you're hiring. There is hiring for delivery. Everywhere else, it's not great. I mean, you look at retail has been absolutely decimated. Media is getting hurt really badly. There's a lot more negatives than there are positives right now.
What do you think is going to be the resulting labor market on the other side of this? Will we have unemployment remain at the, 5-8% level for a while? What's your best guess?
I don't know which industries are going to be the ones who come back. I know that we are going to see, I'm fairly confident that we're going to see a large growth in small businesses and people trying to launch their own thing just because they don't have any other options elsewhere. And I also think we'll see a pretty large disparity in where the jobs are, not necessarily what industries they are, but where they are. So as an example, there are real regional trends that are going on right now with hiring. Our own data shows that Miami had what's considered these days as a mild drop in hiring, about 20% drop in hiring in May, versus Chicago, which had a almost 40% drop in hiring. And then there's the openings. There's some places that are opening and there's some places that are not, that are closed. We're going to have the pandemic causing some cities to open and then close again. And so there's just going to be I think that you'll see real differences around the country in where the jobs are.
Okay, we'll get back to our interview with Dan Roth in just a second. During the break, why don't you do something smart? Why don't you go to the website, jillonmoney.com, and there you can do all sorts of things like check out our resource section. That resource section is filled with really smart and relevant things that Mark has found. So check it out, jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are about to conclude our interview with Dan Roth. He's the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And this is such a strange time because I know a lot of folks celebrated the college graduations of their family members, kids or nieces, nephews, grandkids. Yeah, it was so strange. Although I would say that the virtual graduation that I participated in is probably my favorite graduation that I've attended. Let me just say that. Now, here's the problem. Young workers, you got a pretty crappy labor market. And this is the worst employment landscape since the Great Depression. Let's not sugarcoat it. The National Bureau of Economic Research, they say that COVID-19, they're calling it a major reallocation shock. They think that 42% of recent layoffs will become permanent ones. So that means more than 11.6 million lost jobs. Now, obviously, there's going to be some of those jobs that come back, right? So there's going to be other jobs that appear. But for new entrants into this labor force, it's really tough because you're going to be competing with all those more experienced job seekers. You're all going to be vying for a shrinking number of available positions. And, it stinks. I know a lot of kids had their offers pulled from them. I know that internships have been withdrawn. So, I get it. It's not easy. There's also this other annoying thing, which is just bad luck, that people who graduate into a recession make less money in the early parts of their careers. And it's about 9% of annual earnings in the first 10 years. After 10 years, it kind of gets a lot better. Unfortunately, that, you might be underemployed for a while. Hopefully that this will be a trend that unwinds fairly quickly, but we don't know. We do know that college graduates still do better in the job market than non-college graduates. Their unemployment rate is much lower, but it's going to be a slog. That's it. I think that maybe the best news is that a lot of the analysis does suggest that underemployment is usually a temporary phase. Just take any job, though. Really, that's the most important thing. Any job is the job that you should take. Don't futz around here. So we're going to get into that. Here's the end of my interview with Dan Roth from LinkedIn. I remember your boss, Jeff Weiner, coming on our air and talking about soft skills of college graduates and graduate school folks, that was going to be important. How do you see that balance between now you're talking about networking, computer engineering, and hardware? What kind of soft skills does one need in an era where more people are working from home, where we're doing more Zoom meetings or just, calling and not in person. How would you hire for those skills if you were, hiring new young writers?
The skills that employers demand are the ones that show that you know how to communicate and how to be persuasive. And no matter what, we all need, you've heard over and over again, you need to be a programmer, you need to know how to code, you have to have these technical skills, you've got to be an expert in certain areas. Those kind of skills really help you get started, and they help you get ahead for a short period of time. But to rise to the top, you have to have these soft skills. Now, in a post-pandemic world, in a world where you have a much more distributed workforce, and where there is going to be pretty massive changes in the kind of industries that are around or the new kinds of jobs that are created, I think there are two really big things that are going to matter. One is communication skills, and that's communication over a phone call, over a video conference, over email, and in person. How do you talk to people? How do you get your point across? The second one, and this is a really important one, is adaptability. How well can you adapt to the changing environment? That one defines everything, because it means if you're in a large company and your division shuts down or the world changes like it just did, being adaptable means that you can actually write it out. So you might have a skill to get you a job, but if you want to keep that job, the communication skill and the adaptability are what are going to enable you to hold on to the job and then to rise through the ranks. One example, we've been looking for stories of companies that have gone above the call, that have done a lot for their employees or for the communities. And there's a bookstore in Michigan that immediately did a GoFundMe with their customers. They raised enough money from people they had such a good relationship with their customers that people just gave money to a bookstore. And it was enough for them to hold on to, I think it was 22 of their 24 employees. So smart move by the owners to realize the environment has changed, and they switched to an online ordering process. They had none of that before. They quickly embraced technology. They accelerated something that was already going on. They realized they had to be in the digital age. Even more fascinating to me was there was a bar in Boston who changed the bar was closed down. They couldn't have patrons in, but they realized the owner realized that people needed antibody testing, and he switched his bar to become an antibody testing center. Totally adapted, totally changed his entire business when the world changed. That to me is the kind of adaptability that will be required to make it in whatever this great reset is that we're going through.
I want to end with, it's May, it's graduation season. It is so awful that many of our college students, they've been toiling or drinking for 4 years. They're finally done. They're going to enter the labor force, and the labor force is a mess. What advice do you have for recent graduates?
I'm not sure this is the best advice, and I think that we are all trying to figure this out together. I can tell you what I would do if I were in their shoes. I would know in general where I want to be, what kind of industry, what I want to do in general in the long run. And then I would get any job I could to pay the bills and start figuring out how to network with those people who are in that industry. And I think that if you can't get the perfect job, get a job. Get a job, and then you have to hustle on the side to be able to land where you want to land. It is not going to be easy for these graduates. It is going to be very, very difficult. And they have been told for years that they should pursue what they love. I still think that is good advice, but I would say do not hold out to get that perfect job in the exact area you want. It is going to be a lot of hard work, and you're going to have to work overtime to get noticed and to get attention and to get a book of business in that area, but that's what you got to do.
Thanks so much to Dan Roth for coming on the show this weekend. It's been so great to talk to him and reconnect. If you've got financial questions and you really think that they're career-oriented especially, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of a show or want to check out a past show, go to jillonmoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And you know what? We are here to take the mystery out of your financial life and Never have times been more mysterious than these days. Boy, it's been a heck of a few months. And I'm sorry if any of you have suffered health wise. I'm sorry if you've suffered losses. And we're mostly here to just try to help you do what we can do, which is help you with your financial life. So if you've got a question that needs answering, if there's something that's bothering you, if there is a worry about jobs, whatever it is, anything remotely associated with money, why don't you give us a holler? Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. That's askjill@jillonmoney.com. And let's see, this is a message from Tammy, who writes, Hi, Jill and Mark. I love your podcast. I rarely miss an episode. A big thank you for all you do. By the way, this is a podcast. We have podcast listeners, we have radio show listeners, but we have one big mailbox. It's just askjill@jillonmoney.com. And the podcast is daily. So if you want to subscribe to that daily podcast, it's very easy to do, but I'll get to that in a second. Okay, now here is Tammy's question. She says, I'll start with a little background. I'm 56 years old. I'm recently divorced. I work for the Virginia Medical Center as a registered nurse. I'd like to slow down and work part-time after reaching my full pension age of 62. At that time, my pension will be a little over $2,000 a month. I'll receive Social Security later on. I will own my home outright in about a year. It's worth $550,000. My son's college, fully funded, and I have $425,000 in my TSP account, my thrift savings plan, $170,000 in Vanguard accounts, and a 6-month emergency fund. Pretty good, huh? I max out my retirement at $19,500 per year plus the $6,500 a year catch up. And I live a pretty frugal life. My question is, years ago when I started investing in the thrift savings plan, I only invested in the G fund. The G fund is the government securities fund, so it's basically bonds. Later, Tammy writes, I changed to the 2030 and 2040 lifestyle funds. I've got $160,000 remaining in the G fund. Do you think it would be wise to move a chunk of the G fund into a lifestyle fund while the market is down in hopes of increasing future earnings? That's my question. Be well, Jill and Mark, and stay safe. I don't think you need to change a thing. I really don't. It seems to me that you've got plenty of money. You're going to be able to carry your game plan out. Certainly, it's good to have a stable part of the portfolio. And my guess is that just moving into these funds, there's no reason to try to be cute about this. You're in good shape already. So I say just leave it be, okay? I know that sounds kind of boring, but boring can be really good. All right? Okay. Norman writes, I very much enjoy your daily podcast and I look forward to it every morning. Hey, gang, don't you feel like you're missing out on something? You're listening to us on terrestrial radio. I love terrestrial radio. I'm on terrestrial radio every single day. But if you want to actually get that daily podcast, here's how you do it. See, I told you I'd get to this. I'm very canny that way. You can go to our website, jillonmoney.com, and you will see that we have different ways to read, watch, listen. But if you want to just do something smart, what you can do is you can subscribe to our podcast, and you can do that directly on Apple, on Stitcher, radio.com, Google Play, anywhere else you find podcasts. Now, some of you may not actually know where to find podcasts. Well, if you happen to have something called an Apple phone or an iPhone, there's a little purple icon that says podcasts. You click on it, and then you go down to the bottom right, and all you do is you hit search. And in that search, what do? You just type in Jill on Money. Come on. What could be easier than that? Okay, that's my pitch. You too can enjoy us every single day, but you got to subscribe. Okay? Now, let's get back to Norman. Norman's 68. His wife is 67. They filed a restricted application last year. This is for Social Security benefits. His wife is receiving her full benefit, age 66, and he is receiving half of that benefit. In other words, a spousal benefit. Our original plan was to wait until I was 70 and then apply for my maximum benefit, and my wife would then swap and switch hers to a spousal benefit. However, If I file now at age 68, we will receive $90,000 more for the next 2 years. If I wait until 70, my annual benefit would be 6,000 more per year. So he says, let's boil it down. He says, I've got a break even period of 15 years. If I invest, which I would, the money in a savings account, the interest would probably approximate the COLA increase. It seems like the decision depends on what happens if we live past the 15 years. I used the Maximize My Social Security program. The net benefit between the two strategies is $59,000 if I wait till 70 versus at 68, blah, 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 blah. Here's what I have to say about this. Are you in good health? Do you actually have a need for this money sooner rather than later? I mean, these are like academic questions, but the reality is, if you think about this, this is really a bet on how long you're going to live, and nobody knows that. So, I mean, if it's stressing you out, then claim it now. If it makes you feel better to think that you've maximized this and you really think you're going to have a long life expectancy, then wait. I don't think it's going to make a big difference to your life, but that's just my 2 cents. So I'm going to put the decision back at you. I don't think you're going to make a wrong decision. Okay, you're listening to Jill on Money. When we return, we're going to get more of your questions. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. There, they've got it all right there for you. Hey, before we finish the show, Brian writes, I've dropped the ball. I've got zero money put anywhere for retirement, only what I've paid into Social Security. I'm 53. So what are my best options where I am in my life? I think I need something aggressive. No, you don't. What you need is something automatic. So forget aggressive, go automatic. And if you have a retirement plan through work, make that payroll deduction, do as much as you can. If you don't, then automatically put some money into an IRA account. You didn't say whether you're working freelance or whether you're working for a company, but you got to just do something, get going, and it almost does not matter what you do. Just do something. You might as well just start with something pretty simple, like a target date fund. Okay. Doug writes, I'm 69. I'm still working. When do I have to start taking required minimum distributions from my 401k and my traditional IRA and my Roth IRA? Okay, this is easy. You don't have to start taking any required distributions from your 401k or your traditional IRA until you turn age 72. Roth IRAs do not require that you take a distribution. How cool is that? So the change in required minimum distribution was part of something called the Secure Act. And that was going to be the most mind-blowing, important thing for all retirement planning before the virus hit, because it changed required minimum distribution. It changed some rules. It also changed the rules on inherited if you're not a spouse. But now that seems silly to remember, but it is. It's important. So remember that the required minimum distribution has now been changed. It's extended. It only begins when you're age 72 or the year after you've turned age 72. So good question. Thanks for writing. This has been a great show, and thank you all for participating. Thanks for listening. And remember, if you've got a financial question all week long, you can always just send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. If you're on the website on jillonmoney.com, we've got a contact button, so don't forget, we can get your emails there as well. Stay safe, wear your masks, maintain that social distancing, do something nice for someone in your life, even someone you haven't spoken to in a while. All right, we'll talk to you next week. Be safe.